Let's see if I can redeem myself and wrestle a happy ending into this bad boy, shall we? Alright everyone, it's been a hot minute since part 2 of this What If, so if you need a refresher, when we left off, Frostburn had gone mad with power, kidnapped Arctic and Whiteout, and decided to take her army and set off for the Nightwing Kingdom to find and kill Foeslayer and Darkstalker. At first, the Nightwing Queen didn't believe Clearsight. She thought it was a nightmare, not a vision. She and Queen Diamond were on good terms, after all. Why should the Icewings invade their kingdom? But then the storm blew in. It was unlike any storm the Nightwings had ever witnessed. Their kingdom, situated on a narrow peninsula, was fairly tropical. But one night a snowstorm blew in from the north, blanketing the kingdom in frigid snow, howling wind, and darkness. And the beaches iced over. That was when the Queen called Clearsight back to ask about the Icewings. The ice crept inwards unnaturally, slowly hemming in the Nightwings. Like a living thing, it moved ever towards the dragons, who huddled against the new cold. By the morning after the storm, the ice had reached the Nightwing city, and any dragon caught in it was frozen in place. They lit fires, dug trenches, and filled them with burning wood, trying to stave off the enchanted ice. Dragons hid in their homes, in towers, tried to find shelter or escape across the sea. The howling winds slammed anyone who took flight over the ocean into the lashing waves. Escape over the sea would not be an option. Some tried to escape to the Kingdom of Sand over the mountains. But when they crossed the mountains, they dropped dead in the sky inexplicably, wings fluttering uselessly as their bodies fell to the stone. Frostburn's teeth, the whispers rang in the night. She's enchanted the mountains to kill us, and the sea to swallow us. After 3 days, the message appeared. A white scroll arriving in front of the Queen as she conferred with her advisors, scaring everyone in attendance half to death. "Give me Foeslayer and Darkstalker," the scroll read in blue ink, "or I will wipe the Nightwings from the face of the earth." Darkstalker paced in agitation. When Clearsight had seen Frostburn taking over the Ice Kingdom, when she'd had her very first vision of the disaster, he'd wanted to leave right away, to race home, to find his sister and father. Clearsight had begged him to stay, warning that every path beginning with his return to the tundra ended with his death, and sometimes with that of his family, too. She'd been desperate, claiming that she could find a way forward if only she had time to search the new threads. And Darkstalker had listened, even though it ached to know Whiteout and Arctic were prisoners, to know that Frostburn and the Icewings were flying for the Nightwing Kingdom, for him and his mother. Since the storm 3 days ago, Clearsight had not slept. As badly as Darkstalker wanted answers, wanted a plan to move forward with, she was pushing herself too far. She'd shut everyone out of her study. The last time Darkstalker had seen her, she'd been flying from scroll to scroll, muttering to herself, eyes sunken from stress and exhaustion. He'd been waiting outside her study since she cast him out, hoping for he didn't know what. Hoping she would appear and tell him she needed a break, hoping she would burst out with the answer in her talons. But the hours crawled steadily onward. Outside, the wind shrieked and roared angrily. It was cold. Not as cold as the Kingdom of Ice, and not cold enough to bother Darkstalker, but much colder than the Southern Kingdom had been when he and Foeslayer had arrived what felt like a lifetime ago. Darkstalker had settled against a wall and was dozing off despite himself when, finally, the wooden door to Clearsight's study slammed open, and the pretty Nightwing staggered out. "Clearsight," Darkstalker stuttered as he jumped to his talons. "I found it," she blurted, cutting him off. "I found the path forward." Darkstalker's eyes widened as he faltered. "Really?" he whispered. "You know how to defeat Frostburn?" Clearsight nodded wearily, gesturing for him to follow her back into her study. The usually messy room was a wreck. Paper flung over every surface, even the floor. Inkwells dotted the tables, lanterns flickered, and ice crawled in around the edges of the shuttered window. "Are you all right?" Darkstalker asked as he followed Clearsight inside. She shook her head sharply. None of us will be, she whispered hoarsely. Unless you stop Frostburn. Me? He cried in surprise. Not the Queen? How am I supposed to— Shh, Clearsight cut him off. We don't have much time. I need to explain. Darkstalker swallowed his questions unhappily, settling to listen in silence. Nobody here can stop Frostburn, Clearsight began. In less than half an hour, she will send a message to the Queen, telling her that she will kill the Nightwings unless we give her you and your mother. Darkstalker blanched. The Queen will agree. She does in almost every timeline, Clearsight plowed on. And in almost every timeline, I try to warn her that Frostburn is lying and she doesn't believe me because she knows I love you. And then Frostburn wipes out the entire Nightwing tribe. Shuddering, Darkstalker listened intently. Our only hope is another Animus, Clearsight said. There are no Nightwing Animus dragons. But there is one in the Kingdom of the Sea. A prince. The Kingdom of the Sea? Darkstalker blurted. That's on the other side of the continent. Yes, she nodded. Nobody else knows what is happening to us yet. Frostburn has moved too quickly. By the time any of the other tribes discover what has happened, we will all be dead. We need to send for help. But the storm, Darkstalker said helplessly. Everyone who tried to escape drowned, and nobody can cross the mountains anymore. Clearsight shook her head. That isn't true, she said. If it was, Frostburn couldn't invade. In every vision I've seen, it's only the Nightwings who can't cross the mountains. When they come to kill us, the Icewings cross it easily. So who do we send for help? Darkstalker asked. Clearsight looked at him unhappily. You, she said. You're half Icewing. Darkstalker gaped at her as she continued. In all my visions, you get across the mountains, Clearsight promised. As long as you avoid the Icewing scouts who will be there in 2 hours, and the Nightwing guards who are flying toward this building as we speak. Fear shot through Darkstalker at her words. You need to go to the Kingdom of the Sea and find Fathom, Clearsight said hurriedly. And I'll tell you what to do once you find him, but then you need to escape. Now. Four days later, Darkstalker found himself on a small island in the Bay of a Thousand Scales. Apparently, this was where the Seawing Prince, Fathom, had been spending his days since his grandfather, their last Animus, snapped and murdered most of the royal family. His sister had exiled him to the farthest reaches of their kingdom, with only a few guards for company. With the help of Clearsight's instructions, Darkstalker had found his way here himself. A fact Fathom's guards hadn't seemed to appreciate, but, well, he wasn't exactly here to make friends. Darkstalker had an entire tribe to save. The nervous Seawing hadn't wanted to meet him at first, but Darkstalker had been warned, and he knew that telling Indigo, the snarly dragon in charge of his guard, that the entire Nightwing tribe would die without his help was the right thing to say to draw him out. Darkstalker shifted nervously as he waited, sand sliding against his scales. Clearsight had warned him that the more time passed, the more the future would change. She'd spent days following this exact timeline, studying the branches, trying to learn what caused their small chance of survival. And although she'd given him all the tools she could to ensure Darkstalker would succeed and return in time to save her tribe and his family, there was no surety. The longer he went, the more chances the future had to change, to shift. If he said the wrong thing, if he couldn't convince Fathom to help them, if any number of random, unpredictable things happened, everything would be lost. Darkstalker felt it was only natural that he was nervous right now. Fathom, when he appeared, looked exactly as Clearsight had described him, anxious and haunted by his grandfather's descent into magic. He listened to Darkstalker's story with sympathy and incredulity, looking more and more invested as Darkstalker continued. This, Clearsight had warned, would be the hardest part, convincing Fathom to lend them his magic. He had, apparently, sworn never to touch it again. But Darkstalker was sure that he'd done everything right. He'd started by introducing himself, of course, to help Fathom grow more comfortable with him. Then he'd let Fathom tell his own story, gritting his teeth patiently as the poor Seawing stammered and ducked through his exile and his grandfather, apparently called Albatross, and how he could never use his power again. And finally, Darkstalker had explained how the Nightwings were dying, how he'd been the only one able to escape, and the tribe's head seer had known that Fathom was the only dragon who could save them. Clearsight had been firm. Fathom had to know he was their only hope. That was the only thing that would convince him to break his oath never to use his power again. The lives of an entire tribe in his talons. "No," Fathom said, when Darkstalker asked, and everything came crashing down around him. This wasn't supposed to happen." Fathom was shaking his head, looking down at his talons. "I can't," he whispered, voice pained. "I'm sorry, Darkstalker. I know you think I can help," he said. "But I can't. What if it's too big? What if I mess it up? What if I accidentally kill more than just the Nightwings?" Darkstalker stared in growing horror. It was like Clearsight had said. Things changed. The timeline must have shifted. He'd done something wrong, or gotten unlucky, or... "I'm really sorry," Fathom was saying, green eyes apologetic. "I understand you hoped animus magic would save you, but..." He shook his head, that haunted look back. "Animus magic is evil. It can only be used for evil. I can't ever touch my power again." They sat in silence for a moment, as Darkstalker raced for something, anything, that would change Fathom's mind. He thought of Whiteout, all alone in an Icewing prison. He had to convince Fathom. Fathom stood to leave. "Wait," Darkstalker cried hurriedly. "Fathom, please. Animus magic doesn't have to be evil. Icewings have been using it for centuries. We have..." He scrambled, trying to remember some of the more famous gifts. "We have animus-touched items for healing, for feeding dragons who can't catch prey, for light. Our dragons are trained to use their magic for the good of the tribe. Didn't you ever do anything good with your magic?" He watched on bated breath as the Sea-Wing's eyes slid, almost unconsciously, to Indigo. She was sitting at a distance, glaring at Darkstalker. "Animus magic is a tool," Darkstalker said desperately. Like a knife. You could use it to hurt someone, or you could use it to cut up your dinner. The tool isn't evil or good. What matters is the dragon wielding it." Fathom watched him in silence. "I don't need much," Darkstalker said. "I just need enough magic to undo Frostburn's spells, before she kills an entire tribe. Wouldn't saving all the Nightwings be a good use of your power? Shouldn't one animus be willing to use his power for good?" A long pause. "What do you mean you don't need much?" Fathom asked, skeptically. "You said she's frozen the Kingdom of Night." Hope bloomed in Darkstalker. That wasn't a no. "Clearsight, our seer," he reminded, "thinks that if you can enchant something to undo Frostburn's magic items when I touch them, that would be enough. A small spell. She saw many futures, and she said this spell doesn't affect you or your soul," he added. Technically, that was true. For this spell. But there were other futures where they tried other spells. Well, Darkstalker just needed to make sure Fathom stuck to the plan. Something simple and small, enchanted to remove all animus magic from anything it touched. Then Darkstalker could handle the rest. Probably. Fathom was looking at him pensively. The seer saw that?" he asked softly. "That it doesn't change my soul?" Darkstalker nodded. "Not this spell," he confirmed. "But it could change the course of history. It could save an entire tribe, Fathom." The prince eyed Darkstalker for another long, unbearable minute. Then, finally, "I'll do it." Darkstalker exhaled, shaky with relief. He'd done it. Despite everything, he'd convinced Fathom to make him the talisman. Now, Darkstalker just had to make it count. Hey, here's a what if for you guys. What if there was a part 4? Anyways, that'll be all for today. If you enjoyed this What If, I have others. Head to my channel to check them out, etc, etc. You guys know the drill. Comment below how you think Darkstalker is going to use this magic eraser to defeat his evil sister. Thanks for watching, and enjoy the wait for part 4.